I want you to think of your favorite artist or musician right now. Hold it in your mind. And no doubt, you probably have a story around that musician or artist or performer. The stories usually go like this. I was working alone in my studio and came up with these great lyrics to the next top hit. Or I'm in a cabin in the woods. I wrote my next novel in 3 days. I couldn't stop. And this is a myth of creativity, that it has to be reserved for special occasions. And of course, we perpetuate this myth because we wait for inspiration. Well, in this episode, I'm going to break down one of my favorite books, Mason Currey's Daily Rituals: How Artists Work. He talks about how you can ritualize inspiration, and that goes right in alignment with flow and how I talk about the intersection of creativity and medicine. What does this have to do with medicine, you might think? It's because I believe that a career in medicine is one of the most creative careers. You see, you're energetically engaged with a patient. You're using all 5 senses, which means you're putting yourself in flow, and you're using this to make critical decisions on diagnoses. Then you synthesize and look for patterns, similarities, and differences to then create a brand new narrative of a new story moving forward of how this patient is going to feel better. So this is highly creative. And it's really taking all of your being to come into every appointment, every exam. There's a lot of crossover between artists, musicians, doctors, and all the creatives as we start to make a new narrative and a new story for our patients. So stay tuned. This episode will break it down, and I have a fun exercise at the end for you to consider. Hi, I'm Dr. Laura Salyer, a former burned out physician turned mentor and coach for overworked healthcare professionals looking to catalyze their spark and spirit by redefining medicine as a self-expression of the healing arts. I believe doctors deserve to flourish inside and outside the exam room. So if you're ready to step into your highest creative power and transform your practice, this channel is for you. Subscribe, and together we'll color outside the lines and paint your work-life masterpiece. Okay, we start with a story. So this one is actually quite short and simple, but to the point. Early on, as I was trusting my intuitive gut feelings to resign from my previous position as a family medicine doctor and open up my functional medicine clinic, I really felt this pull to dive into writing. I've always wanted to write stories, but really specifically write what I know. As I guess my sophomore English teacher would say, is start with what you know. And what I knew was my story from Burnout into Bliss, and how I used creative methods and flow neuroscience to really dive into expressing myself in this unique way and encouraging others to use their medical career as a self-expression tool. I wanted to write my memoir, and more because it was something as a love letter for my family of appreciation and gratitude that we're on this crazy roller coaster of life together, and that you, as a human, as a soul that wants to birth forward some legacy, you absolutely have choices. I wanted to show my kids that no matter where you were rooted, you could always choose differently. And for me, that meant taking a crack at health entrepreneurship because I wanted to express that side of my creativity. So years ago, I set out to make a routine a la James Clear, Atomic Habits. I thought every morning before I would see patients in my practice here, I would reserve 2 hours of creative writing time to write my memoir. Now, some days were easy and it flowed. It felt like I knew I had this time for myself and the words would come, and other days it was just a blank laptop screen. But I stuck to my routine, and I told myself it's 2 hours every day during Monday through Friday. And before I knew it, the book was written. And it took a couple months, but I knew it was going to happen because I saved time for it. Now, normally, the visions I had of artists and musicians and other creatives was that of, stories like I was sitting there in my studio and I was inspired and I thought of the lyrics to the next song within an hour. Or I'm in a cabin in the woods and I wrote my novel in 3 days. Those are the typical stories of creativity. But I knew through the research from Flow Research Collective that you can routinize, you can make this routine, you can practice creativity daily, and it benefits you. It lowers your stress. So how happy was I to see a book by Mason Currey called Daily Rituals, How Artists Work. And these same tenets can apply to a career in medicine. So I'd like to talk about 9 of my favorite takeaways from his book with examples of how you can apply this in your day. As a healer, it's very creative. You are literally creating health. You're creating understanding. You're creating clarity. You are in the cauldron of creativity and energy. So it really makes sense to learn how to maximize that creativity so that you stay fresh and vitalized and you don't burn out. Telling stories is incredibly healing. And when I was going through my burnout years ago, I remember thinking, someday I want to write a book about this. It feels very isolating and alone when the career you thought you signed up for and you worked so hard for ended up causing such immense damage to your identity, to your relationships, to the very seat of your soul. But I found my way back, and it was through creativity and flow neuroscience. And when I felt like I was in a better spot, that's when I wrote my memoir, Right Brain Rescue: One Physician's Journey from Burnout to Bliss. And I tell my story with humor, with that Midwest practicality and wit. And it's available on paperback, Kindle, and Audible if you can stand my Wisconsin accent. So give it a listen. It received high ratings and many could relate so that you don't feel alone and you know how you can tap in to your little creative muse waiting inside. Head to the link below in the show notes and check out Right Brain Rescue: Burnout to Bliss. Okay, let's start with the first important takeaway. Number 1, routine matters. He goes into, all the reasons why, structure actually helps creativity. But really it's about consistency, and our brain is a predictive machine. So the more you can kind of make things automatic, it frees up your energy to welcome in other ideas and to act on them. So for example, if you begin each day with a short meditation or maybe a small chart review and you set the tone, your body and brain begin to really count on that as a nice grounding mechanism. It doesn't have to be that example, but that really helps you open up other times where you can have bursts of creative work. It helps you understand how your mind can be open to other ideas as your day unfolds. Number 2 is circadian productivity. And this is key. You can't maximize your productivity unless you know your circadian rhythm and are honest about it. Unfortunately, many of our healthcare systems require an 8 to 5 mentality. Of course, unless you're an ER doctor or a surgeon on call. But think outside the box or color outside the lines. Maybe asking your administrative staff if you could have adjusted hours. Maybe you prefer a later afternoon or evening hours for your productivity. And shifting that slightly can actually make you happier because you're acting in alignment with your natural circadian rhythm. But if you're like most of us, we're kind of stuck in the 8 to 5. So in that case, it's not all bad. What you can do is look at how in your day do you find ideas come easiest to you? Those differential diagnoses, those charting, pre-charting, post-charting, the quick, checking off the list. I'm a morning person, so that's why I scheduled that creative writing piece in the morning. But if you are somebody who actually takes a while to get going, then maybe you save your complex cases, your chronic patients, the really mystery cases until the afternoon, because maybe that's your highest circadian think time. And then maybe in the morning, if it takes you a while to wake up, you have other things to do, administrative work or other easier cases that you can consider. I also like to use circadian rhythm to jumpstart me back into flow. So I schedule things like a walk or a short run during those times when I'm starting to dip, and it helps get me back into flow. Number 3 of Mason Currey's book, dedicated workspaces. I don't know the study, and I've tried to look it up. So if any of you listeners know, please reach out, plop it down below in our YouTube channel. I remember as a medical student hearing of this study where they took college students and had them eat a certain snack. It was like raisins and chocolate. It was something with caffeine and sugar, and then study in the same area. And they would only study in the same room, so that when they took the test in that same room, they were able to recall more information because it was a routine. The same snack, same room, same test. But when they took them out of that environment, different food, different room, they actually had poor test taking. It's like your mind, your brain gets used to your environment, and then you're able to recall better. So use that to your advantage, having a dedicated workspace. Hopefully, you have your own office at work. I hope. More and more hospitals and clinics are being built without doctors' offices, but hopefully you have a little corner of a space that you can call your own. Or if you're even a floating locum tenens, you can bring a little kit with you. And maybe it has your favorite photos of friends and family, or a nice, good smelling, a potpourri or something. Maybe a fuzzy little lap blanket you can put on the back of your chair. I want you to create your own little ecosphere of dedication and comfort, your favorite potted plant or fake plant. But nonetheless, you get the idea, trying to incorporate all the senses in your own dedicated workspace. How can you make your desk your home away from home? For me, it was pictures of my family. It was all this fun, creative stuff. And when some of my residents from my husband's residency, when they were all gone at a conference one time, I went into his room and I redid it, putting toys and playful things in there so that when they came back, they had this wonderful opportunity to see a new space that was dedicated to thinking and play and creativity and downtime. So how can you bring this sense of wonder and relaxation into what could be a potentially stressful place every day that you go to? Put it in there. Put it on a list. What can you bring from home that makes you feel comfortable? Number 4 is balancing social and solitude life, right? That's hard. We feel like we're talked out at the end of the day. You're seeing a lot of patients. I get it. So we don't prioritize the wonderful medicine it can be to be among colleagues. Not to mention, again, the architecture of current hospitals and clinics are showing that doctors' lounges are disappearing. They're just not being built anymore. And I loved the doctor's lounge as a medical student. I loved walking in and grabbing a chocolate milk from their fridge because they always had some like little snacks you could grab. And as a med student who never knew where they were going to roost next, you grab food when you can. Nowadays, I probably wouldn't grab chocolate milk. It might be something a little healthier, but at the time I didn't know. And so I loved it because I could hear conversations from other physicians that had been doing this for decades. And I'd always, grab onto some kind of wisdom. But there was also this camaraderie of a shared experience. So if you don't have a doctor's lounge, how can you build that into your life? Maybe send out an email to staff that are around your same age or your same specialty and see if they're interested in maybe just once a month going somewhere, whether it's a bowling alley or a coffee shop, just so informal. And you could have themed nights. You could have just informal book club reviews or make it no agenda at all, just free space. And the promise is just community and togetherness. That is so important. And if you're a virtual clinician, you can do this online in a co-working space. Perhaps you invite them to maybe one night every couple weeks, you just get online together and you can do your charts as somebody else is working on their charts. Just knowing that there's community close by, especially with all the technology we have, it's impossible not to feel connected, but also paradoxically very isolated. Measuring this is important though, because as you know, you can have your battery drained. So really do this wisely when you feel like you need that support, and ask your administration how they can help and see if they can bring this togetherness back so we feel not so alone. Number 5 on Mason Currey's book is exercise and physical activity, regular movement. helps stimulate bilateral neurotransmission, right? So if you want to get geeky, Francis Shapiro, who invented EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, where a clinician who is trained is helping you process some event by having you engage in bilateral activity, whether it's holding vibrating paddles or an eye motion bar. But that was discovered when she was walking and was looking side to side. And there's something really medicinal and creative about bilateral movement and activity, whether it's shaking your rump in a Zumba class or walking or running. But peppering this in is a highly creative activity. I would call them running gifts. After I would run, I would come up with these ideas and epiphanies that would solve a problem or put a diagnosis to a name. And it's really important because when you're in the thick of it as a medical student or resident, there's really no time for exercise. You have to really try hard to make time for it. And when you do, you're kind of tired. So think about other ways you can routinize or make it routine in exercise or physical activity. And one way you could do it is intermittent fasting. You might create some time where you do a little bit of intermittent fasting, even though it has nothing to do with activity like exercise. It can create this other cadence, this circadian rhythm. Or if you're on call, maybe you have rules like, no skipped meals while on call, and I'm only going to take the stairs. Creating a gamification of how you play with your body and move it in certain ways can also help kind of stimulate those creative thoughts. And don't forget, have your phone nearby or a junk journal, because when you come up with these thoughts, you want to contain them somewhere. Number 6, handling creative blocks. This is what stymies most of us. We're zooming along in flow. Maybe you're thinking of the next cake you want to bake for your son's 3rd birthday party, or the next party you want to plan for Halloween. Not to say I haven't done that. And suddenly you feel kind of drained. You don't have any more thoughts. Your creativity is gone. Or let's say you have a great day of seeing patients, but this one just stumps you. You can't put together a diagnosis and you feel like you're just grasping at straws. That's a block, a mental block. And most of the time, we think, well, we just wait for the inspiration to come back. But actually, artists have creative ways to deal with these mental blocks. Usually they'll change their environment, they'll change their routines, they'll work on something different. By releasing their focus on one activity and moving to something else, you actually can create more problem solving on that initial activity. And that happens all the time because, again, the default mode network, your alpha brainwaves are always working in the background. So that's, again, why if you have a block and you want to handle something and you can't figure it out, just changing your state and environment. How can you switch up your day when you're stuck? If you can't go outside, maybe doodle on a notepad. Just squiggles over and over. It's distracting your thinking brain, allowing it to turn off and letting you just let your thoughts run free. I like to pick from a list of flow enhancers and flow blockers. So when I'm feeling stuck, I look at this massive list that I have and I look, what am I doing that could be blocking my flow? Let's remove that. And then also, what can I pepper into my day that can enhance flow? And if you're interested in learning your own flow triggers, your own flow blockers, and what ideal play activity, I would encourage you to take the Catalyst Archetype Quiz. You'll learn one of 4 personality types. I'll put the link in the show notes. And you'll get a free PDF that tells you all about your risks for burnout, but also how you can invite more flow and play and creativity in your day. Okay, number 7, the power of rituals. Rituals, even simple ones, they help artists transition into that creative mindset. So rituals, right? Think of how you can put a ritual in your day, whether it is like we talked about the ritual of opening up your phone and looking at your Duolingo streak. Maybe you do that and you only do that at noon because that's your ritual. You're sitting down with your lunch and you're going to practice your Italian. Think of rituals you want to invite into your life in other ways. Maybe you have a gratitude wall in your office and it's a ritual for all staff to put one thing of gratitude down. They write or draw something that they're grateful for once a week, right? Or maybe you have like we talked earlier, a power up or power down ritual, some way that you can make a ritual. And that's a little different in my mind than routine. And I don't know, maybe I disagree with the author on this, or he might think similarly, but routine feels like you're planning your calendar. Ritual has a little bit of ceremony to it. And you can make anything into a ritual. It's really that source of intention that you apply to it. So for me, I have a ritual in my creative space at home. When I'm going to play with paint or draw, I light a candle. And somehow it becomes a ritual, right? All it took was one lit candle, and I feel like suddenly I'm in a beautiful ritual of creativity rather than just playing. And there's just something powerful about that little intention that you set forth. Number 8, the constraints. Constraints actually will fuel creativity. Yes, I know. That sounds counterintuitive. You imagine renting that cabin to write that novel and take weeks and weeks, but actually, the more constraints you apply, your brain works a little harder to be creative. And for me, that happened with having Uber duty, mom Uber. When I was starting my functional medicine practice, I had to be done by 2:30 every day. And for the first time in my life, I kind of longed for a longer workday because trying to build a practice and see patients and get charts done as soon as I dropped the kids off at 8:15 and then be done by 2:30, that was hard. But I did it because I actually was inspired to get it done in that short amount of time. So you can do faux constraints by setting timers. Real simple. Can I get this chart done in 5 minutes? How can I work on this just a little faster? Right? Or, can you create templates that will seem like, oh, this is cookie cutter. I mean, this is my anxiety template for my anxious patients, or this is my IBS template. But actually, it's constraining you because it allows you then to not have to think about all those things again. You can create more thoughts on top of them for a more robust visit. So look at how you can, use constraints to your advantage, and it helps you augment what you're doing. And finally, persistence over perfection. This one's my favorite. This one is my favorite. Why? Because we need to have a BM once a day, one bare minimum daily. Done is better than perfect. And as a clinician, we are trained in perfection. That's how we get where we're at. You've aced your MCAT scores. You've applied to your medical schools. You've gotten into residency. Now you're in. We have jumped through so many hoops of perfectionism. So it's no shock that a lot of us have a hard time dismantling that. Perfection is an advantage, but what if it's not? And it stands in the way of you relaxing into your unique gifts as a healer, your self-expression as a healer that thinks differently than everyone else, and that is unique and kind of standing above the rest because you allow that personality to bubble through. And medicine should be fun. It should be a self-expressive act. It should be a creative act where you're helping your patient heal. So instead of perfectionism, what is the bare minimum you can do today just to show up? And what I mean by that is, don't get stuck in worrying about getting everything right. Just show up as human and trust that this patient is going to find healing. You will figure it out with them. And the power is not coming from you. It is a co-creation process. It is a group flow process. Showing gratitude as you come into this will help you go easy on yourself so you don't feel like you have to be perfect. When I was heavily into music, I was trying to decide between being a clarinetist or being a physician. And the reason I decided to be a physician is I knew I could play music on the side, but at least in America, I couldn't be a musician and be a doctor on the side. And I don't regret that decision at all. But I do remember that music, much like sport, much like even a career in medicine, it demands a certain perfectionism, right? You're practicing your scales. You're trying to get your articulation correct. I was a clarinet player. You're competing and you're trying to level up. But there becomes a certain point where you just have to let go and surrender into the music and trust that all the muscle memory will be there and trust that you will make something beautiful happen, even with mistakes. And dare I say, I don't think anybody is ever perfect in the world of music or sport or medicine because we're human. So look at elements of your day. How can you let yourself take a little break? Give yourself a little credit. Do the bare minimum and trust that you are making magic no matter what. Okay, so now we're at the end, and I'm going to give you my promised activity that I'd like you to try. And now, if you're watching my social media channels, you may already have seen a picture of this. I have been going through a tough time personally recently, and so I decided to make something routine. I don't know how long I'm going to keep up this streak, but for now, what I do is I tell myself I'm going to color my heart once a day. Now, this is an exercise I borrowed from my wonderful sister, Dr. Katie Salyer, who is a PsyD. She is a health and wellness psychologist specializing in trauma. And there's an exercise called Color My Heart where you simply just pick 3 to 5 colors that you feel exemplify how you're feeling right now, and you color your heart. And that's it. Those are the only instructions. I took it a step further and I created an outline of the anatomy of a heart, not just a simple heart shape. I really wanted to embrace this activity. And so what I did is created a template and an outline of this heart. And I just put 6 per sheet of paper. And so once a day, I think about what are the colors of my heart, or how does my heart feel right now? And I metaphorically, or, as best as I can, try to draw that on that heart. Sometimes it's a single color, like black. Sometimes it looks like a ball of yarn wrapped up tight. Sometimes it's really ugly. It's just a bunch of colors and doesn't make sense at all. And other times I really try to put what I'm trying to feel in a picture form. But no matter what it is, it's such a great routine. It's allowed me to really process this difficult stage and season of my life with one creative activity a day, just to color my heart. So I would love to hear if anybody wants to try this. It's a simple thing, and you don't have to have an anatomy outline of a heart. You can just use a regular heart. But we can express a lot through therapeutic art and process our emotions that way. And this one simple routine every day has really helped me. Now I look back and I see all these versions of hearts, and I can remember how I was feeling, and it's something that lifts me up. So if you're listening and you've got like an employee lounge or a doctor's lounge, consider drawing a bunch of hearts on the walls, or make it a brain or a bone if you're an orthopedic. It can be whatever. It can be a square. It can be a circle. But taking the break once a day to color how you're feeling and draw, no matter if you're good or not, can be the most wonderful thing you can do for yourself today. Thank you for coloring outside the lines with me today. Listen, if you feel compelled, I would love to hear an honest review. It helps other people find us. I read every single one, and it would mean so much to me if you took that time. I incorporate your feedback into every episode, so let me know what you'd like to hear about next, and keep coloring outside the lines.